Good afternoon and welcome to today's Coffee with Cobb. My name is Kate Vintage. I will be your moderator today. Today we are talking about our third installment in the software or in the security series that we are doing. This will be focusing on software security specifically. If you have watched some past Coffee with Cobbs, you might know that we've talked about cybersecurity. This will be focusing mostly on how your software can affect the security of your small to medium-sized business. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining. With us today are Jeff Blunt, our VCIO, and Jeff Bolton, our network administrator. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass off the torch to the Jeffs.
Great, thank you, Kate. You mentioned that previous segments of Coffee with Cobb, the cybersecurity segment that we did. I would encourage our listeners, to go back and find that archive segment on our website, and watch that. In that segment, we detailed, what a small business owner needs to think about for the overall, security of their network. The software obviously is a piece of that security. So today we'll talk specifically about the security around the software you use and some of the items that you should look into to ensure that you're safe. All in all, software security really isn't that different from network security. So, a lot of the same principles hold true, but we will kind of detail some of the differences and some specific things for you to look at. When you're thinking about software security, there's a couple of things that you need to think about. Is your software going to be in the cloud? Is it going to be going on, going on site? Maybe on a server or even possibly like your local computer. Depending on where your software resides, there's a couple of different things that you need to do from a security perspective. Who has access to the software? Do you need to follow any sort of regulations that will require your software to be configured a special way? Jeff and I will get into these details as we go through the rest of the segment here.
So let's talk a little bit about the importance of software security.
Yeah, obviously it's an important piece. Small business owners definitely need to be concerned about it. It's like I mentioned, it's a piece of the overall network that you have in your organization. If you secure the rest of your network, but you don't look into your software, there's going to be a big hole there. It would be like locking your front door, but leaving your window wide open. Software is obviously where most of the data of your organization lives. Your customers' data, even some of your employees' information, and like an HR type of software. So this is where the hackers are trying to get to, right? That's what they want. They want that data. So obviously it's a very important piece. With all that being said, obviously you don't want to neglect the security of the rest of your network. So it really all has to work together to really perform a holistic approach to your overall security of your organization.
So let's talk a little bit about on-site security for your software, Jeff.
Thank you, Kate. These days there's a big push for multi-factor authentication, or MFA. Lately we've been saying that if you're only going to do one thing, that should be enabling the use of MFA. This is the easiest thing you can do that's going to have the biggest impact on your security. In fact, a recent study by Microsoft showed that just simply by using MFA, you can reduce your potential of breaches by up to 99%, which is, pretty significant. So MFA, which is also sometimes referred to as two-factor authentication or 2FA, is a security feature that allows you to present two or more pieces of information as your credentials. So when you're logging into your account, your credentials would fall into any of these three categories. Something like your password or a PIN number, something you possess, like a smart card, or something that you are, kind of like a fingerprint or some other type of biometric. So your credentials have to come from two different categories. Otherwise, the whole point of MFA is skipped. So remember, what you're trying to do is prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that you are who you say you are, because anyone else trying to gain access to your account wouldn't be able to provide that additional factor of authentication that you own. For example, here at Cobb, with Office 365 for our cloud email, when we log in, we enter our username and password, and then we get a code that's sent to us via text message to our cell phone, and that text message is the second factor of authentication. So any bad actors that have your password would not be able to get past that second requirement. So that's a simple overview, but kind of hopefully hammers home how important MFA is. And more software suites are offering that functionality than ever before. So it's absolutely worth your time to look into that for any application that you have. Along the same lines, forcing your employees to use a strong password and changing them regularly is another great way to make security stronger. For example, a strong password would be something that has a combination of uppercase and lowercase letters, strong special characters, and numbers. Educating your employees on the proper use of your software is also very important. For instance, if you allow your software to be accessible remotely or over the internet, then you need to have policies in place that your employees can only connect from a company device, or they have to use a VPN or virtual private network so they have an encrypted tunnel back to the corporate location. And speaking of policies, you should have an acceptable use policy for your organization so that all of your employees can read and understand and sign it. Everybody's on the same page, and this ensures that you set standards on how to use the software and there's no confusion for anybody. So if you are allowing your software to be accessible over the internet, you're going to want to get an SSL certificate, which stands for Secure Sockets Layer. That's something you're probably going to want to talk to your IT group about. Basically, an SSL certificate is going to create an encrypted connection between your web browser and the server where the website is hosted. So any information you transfer won't just be like if you type your password in, it's not going through exactly as you entered it. It's going to be encrypted. So if someone was able to intercept your traffic, they wouldn't be able to make any sense of it. Anytime you see HTTPS instead of plain old HTTP in your web address, or if you see the padlock icon in the address bar, you can feel confident that you're protected by SSL. And you can assign these certificates to websites or VPN connections. So whatever your application is, you should be able to cover all the bases. So software updates, also very important, whether they're done by yourself or an IT group or by a vendor. Most of the time, these are going to provide improved security features when the versions get updated. So staying as close as you can to the most recent version is important as long as your hardware allows it. And along kind of as a segue, lastly, when you're keeping your hardware on site, you're inherently taking on the responsibility to meet and maintain the requirements of the software. So you might need to provide a new server or a stronger server or a new SQL database, or make sure you have additional power or a stronger internet connection, or even room enough in your office to put the servers. So with this responsibility comes the need to ensure that the management and monitoring and backups of the software are in good hands. So as a small business owner, if you don't have an IT department or an outsourced IT group to do these things for you, unintentional neglect could lead to security and reliability problems in the long run. So if that hits a little too close to home, we'd love to talk to you and see how we could help.
Awesome, thanks, Jeff. So Jeff, we just talked about on-site software security. Are there any differences between cloud software security?
A lot of it is about the same. So some of it holds really true on both sides. The enabling MFA. We're probably going to say that 4 or 5 more times before we're done today. That's the best thing you can do, and whether it's on site or in the cloud, that's what you should do. Forcing strong passwords, changing the passwords, having policies in place and the proper way to use the software. All that stuff stays, regardless of where the software lives. But there are a couple of things that you may want to look at and investigate, if you're going to have software or your application in the cloud. Because that responsibility of that network infrastructure that Jeff was talking about is kind of placed on somebody else, another vendor or hosting provider. It'd be good just for your information to learn, where that software vendor is hosting your data. I'm going to use QuickBooks, for instance. Obviously QuickBooks is a very popular software with small businesses. And if you chose to use QuickBooks hosting services for your organization, you really should understand, where is my QuickBooks data going to live? From their website, I learned that QuickBooks uses Microsoft Azure's services or databases to host QuickBooks. And they go even further to say that your data is going to always reside within the country where your organization lives. So that's really important to know in the event that Microsoft may be having some sort of issues with their Azure environment, or if there's some sort of breach of the environment. It'd be good for you to know, was my data potentially affected there? And also with having, the vendor host your software for you, it's pretty typical that they will perform the software version updates, that Jeff was talking about a minute ago. You obviously want to keep up with what that schedule is going to be to reduce any sort of downtime or kind of unexpected changes. The last kind of difference I would say with a cloud hosted software, backups are a pretty important thing. You typically don't think about backup being a security feature, but the defense against like a ransomware virus or something like that. Honestly, a backup is probably your best value there that you're going to have against ransomware. But it would be great for you to understand, how often is my backup, or how often is my data being backed up? What's the retention schedule? Can I go back to last week? Can I go back to last month or last year? How long do you keep backups for me? In the event that I need to restore some data, what does that look like? What is the time frame? So those sort of questions, when you put your software in the site or you give it to somebody else to take care of for you, just some important things for you to have an understanding of exactly how are they going to do those different things for you.
Thanks. So it sounds like a lot of the same and a lot of different things too. So let's talk a little bit more. What's better for a business, hosting on-site or in the cloud?
Well, that's kind of an open-ended question that doesn't really have a solid answer, because it really depends on what the needs are of your organization, what the requirements of the software are. There's all kinds of different variables there. For instance, to keep up with the QuickBooks example that Jeff was talking about a minute ago, and we've seen this in real world. If you need to integrate your QuickBooks software with your customer relationship management, CRM software, then you might have to keep QuickBooks in-house to make that integration work. For example, if the CRM software does not support integrating with the cloud version of QuickBooks, you might not have any choice but to keep QuickBooks local or something along those lines. We've seen that happen more than once. So, also keep in mind, if you're required to follow some sort of regulatory guidelines, it might be best to have your software hosted in a compliant and secure data center rather than in your own network closet or server room where it could get damaged or somebody could hack into it or steal it even. So it's just some things to think about, but not a solid answer. It just really depends on what you're trying to do and what the requirements of the system are.
And I would also add too, if your company has several locations across a wide geographic area, a hosted solution may be a better option for you. It might prevent your employees from having to connect to a VPN and just offer a better user experience. And again, if you don't have a internal IT group or an outsourced IT service, then pushing your software to a hosted option may be the best thing for you. Allowing that hosting provider to take care of the server updates and the backups and all those things I was talking about a minute ago. Just like Jeff was saying, there's several different factors that it depends on, and I don't think we can say that on-site's more secure or hosted or cloud is more secure. There's just a lot of different factors that play into what may be best for your individual situation.
So what are some actions that companies can take now to kind of start securing their software?
Yeah, one thing that I talk a lot with my customers about, cyber reliability insurance. It's not really a security feature, but it's a really great thing for a small business to have. if you're not too familiar with cyber liability insurance, it's basically an insurance policy that helps cover you in the event that you have some sort of breach, and there's several different things that needs to happen if you have a breach. So provides all sorts of funds and resources for you to be able to help detect what went wrong and how to recover from that. One important thing about cyber liability insurance is making sure that your network and your software meets the requirements that the policy states. So we're hammering home that MFA stuff. So the policy may require you to have MFA turned on any sort of software application that you use. So so that's a great thing there. If your industry doesn't have any sort of regulations or anything that you need to follow, and you may be wondering, like what's a good benchmark for me? Where should I be? Because I don't have any sort of governing body telling me, where I need to be. The NIST guidelines, it's the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's the federal government created those, and within those guidelines, there's a cybersecurity section, and it gives some really great information about just general cybersecurity guidelines and general security guidelines around your business and what it should look like and what you should have in place. So I would encourage you to go out to Google and check that out, and just kind of use that as a good measuring stick for where you should be. And we've mentioned it a couple of times today too. An IT professional is a great resource for you, just to help consult and get an understanding of what your organization looks like and what your needs are and what would be best, cloud or on site, or all sorts of different things that an IT professional could help you with.
Well, awesome. That is it for the presentation part of this Coffee with Cobb, but now we're going to go ahead and move on to some questions. We already have one question up here. It is, what if MFA is not available for my software? What else can I use?
I can take that one. If MFA is not available, pretty much the idea is going to be to use as strong of a password as you can. A long, confusing, complex password that is going to be very difficult, if not impossible, for somebody else to guess. You don't want this to be something that's derived from another password or something that you used 10 or 15 years ago, or something with a different number at the end of it. You want a fresh password. I would suggest going to Google and Googling a random password generator. You'd be surprised with how complex of a password you can come up with. Of course, at that point, you'd want to make sure you have some other method to keep track of those passwords. But one thing to think about is also, like, we have to do that here a lot. Like, if you have an account for something like accounts receivable that doesn't actually belong to a human being, the two-factor becomes difficult, because there's not a cell phone to send a text message to or something like that. So in those cases, for service accounts and things like that, we recommend just using a very strong and secure password that would be difficult to guess, because that's probably still the hardest thing to reverse engineer. That's what we would suggest if you MFA is not available.
Awesome. So we got a couple more questions rolling in here. How do I find out if my software is available in the cloud?
Yeah, obviously the best thing I would say is, reach out to the software vendor and just find out what the options are. More and more vendors are offering to host it themselves. You can get your own, Azure or AWS or, Google. All sorts of these big companies are all getting into hosting services. You could, if the vendor doesn't provide a cloud version or a hosting option, then you may be able to host it yourself if that's an option. But again, talking with your IT professional, whether that's on site or you've got an outsourced IT group, connecting up with them and getting some help there, or just reaching directly out to the software vendor and asking some questions.
Cool. So we got one more here. It's, how often do I need to train my employees on security best practices?
Yeah, I think I'd say, it at least monthly, security awareness training is a really big thing right now. It's a great tool that you can use in your organization that's on the human side of cybersecurity. We talked a lot about that and that cybersecurity segment that we did a couple of months ago here on Coffee with Cobb. But how often do I need to train my employees? I'd say, at least once a quarter, just some educational, even if it's a quick stand up, 15-minute, don't forget about resetting your password and using a strong password, or, something along those lines should be sufficient for you.
Well, great. We actually got another one rolling in here. And it is, what do I need to include in my security training?
Yeah, I think that's kind of depends on what you're training about. If you're training about your specific software, let's keep QuickBooks as an example. Who potentially has access to QuickBooks? There can be some sensitive information in there. You can do payroll with QuickBooks and all sorts of accounting stuff. So, you obviously don't want your QuickBooks file or your QuickBooks data just to be open to the rest of the organization. So just training your employees on, just being cognizant on who has access to that and being careful about, leaving it up on your screen as you walk away for lunch or, something along those lines. And then if you're talking more about like security around phishing emails and things like that, we've talked about that on Coffee with Cobb before too. That's really good just to help educate your employees on what to watch out for, what to look for on a phishing email, and how to kind of spot the differences and the ways that those bad actors try to trick you.
We got another one coming in, and it is LastPass secure?
It's kind of like become the industry standard. I think it's owned by LogMeIn these days. So I don't have a ton of experience with it personally, but from everything that I've read, you can feel very confident using that to store your other passwords. As long as you have a strong enough password on that, to kind of secure the vault. I don't think you should have any fear using that to manage the rest of your passwords.
And I would certainly add in too, if I think a password manager is a great idea because, who can remember all the passwords that we have to remember nowadays? And if you're going to use a password manager, turn on MFA on your password manager. I'm just going to hammer that home again. It's use a strong password and use MFA on it, because the last thing you want is one of those hackers to get into your password database.
Definitely. And I just want to add to that, the person who posed that question, nice name. If you have any other questions, we'll hang on for just one more second. And while we're just hanging out here for a second, I've got a question. We were talking about SSL a little bit. Is there any difference between SSL and TLS?
Yeah, I mean, it's just different security, protocols that have been around for a long time. I think TLS has probably been, I mean, both of them are really old. You'd think of them as modern things, but they've all been around for a long time. They've just gone through different iterations. I know certain versions of TLS at this point are basically like a big no-no to use because they're so insecure. So it would come down to looking at the application and seeing what functionality it uses and making sure if there is the option for multiple TLSs or whatever, you want to make sure that you're on whatever the latest one that you can comfortably run, because just like if you had a website without an SSL certificate would be insecure, if you're running something with a version of security that has so many holes in it that you might as well not have it, you're just in just as bad a shape. So I don't think either one is better or worse, but they are different in what they do. You just need to do a little bit of looking into what how it applies to whatever solution you're looking at.
Cool, thanks. Well, it looks like that's all that we have for questions today. To all of our attendees, if you have any other questions that we didn't get to, you can always email us at coffee@cobbtechnologies.com. And as always, we will have a recording of this episode and the slides up on our Coffee with Cobb's archives. You can find that archives on cobbtechnologies.com and then going to the Coffee with Cobb tab up at the top navigation bar. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you stopping by, and have a good Thursday. See you later.